Did you listen to the Becca one? Oh, you
I
did.
did.
You did,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I listened to it while I was at the gym. I was running. It was a good
Did
conversation.
it get you
Really good.
motivated? Did it keep you pumped?
At one point, I did have to turn up the speed. I was like, "You guys are talking too slow. I need something. I need them to be a little faster."
Hello and welcome to the Android Police Podcast. My name is Daniel Bader. This week on the show, Google is being attacked on all sides by Epic, by the government, and now by the Android Police Podcast.
Exactly.
So, joining me this week, as always, Will Sattelberg. How are you?
I'm good. It's not always. I wasn't on last week.
You were not. I mean, I had a great time without
You
you.
did. It was a great I'm sad I missed the conversation, but no, it was. If you missed last week's episode, go back and listen to it with Becca Versace, because it was the type of conversation while I was listening to it where I was like, I'm sad I'm not there for it, but also you two are so much more camera focused than I am that I was like, I'm almost glad that they were able to have this conversation without me being there, being like, cameras, right? Gotta love them. It was good. It was a good talk.
It was my dream conversation. Like, legitimately, I was buzzing through the whole thing, and you could probably hear it in my voice when I have thought of Becca as somebody I admire forever since I met her 4 years ago. I've watched all of her stuff. I find her like low-key geeky love of technology and like the nuances of cameras and audio and everything to be so endearing and so close to the way that I think about technology, right? I don't think about phones as like a way to play faster games. Like, I don't care about frame rates. I care about how it makes me feel and how useful it is to the things that I do every day, which are not going to be the same as the things you do every day.
Right.
And that's what I love about how she approaches things, is that every opinion she has is very entwined with her lifestyle and her biases and her sort of way of thinking about the world. And I think, like, not only is that the future of tech journalism, but that's also the future of content, right? Like, it's much more creator focused and much more insular because the products themselves are so much less interesting. And that, I hope at least got through in the conversation. And process, that's something that I've really explored a lot this year. How do you, in doing the things that you do every day, just like slowly chip away at the overhead of getting things done so that you're not fighting against the systems that you've put in place as much as you do, right? As much as you tend to do. So hearing how she works and hearing how she's kind of adapted her workflow in her new independent career it was really gratifying. And yeah, I'm hoping to send you on vacation more often so that I can have interviews like that.
Why can't we can do, I don't want to say a three-way interview. That sounds like I'm implying something.
Are you propositioning me, Will?
Yeah, exactly.
Live on a podcast?
I think one time I tried to file an HR complaint against you, and I asked you who to go to, and you said you. So I'm pretty sure that you are. I'm just doing this right to the head of HR.
True, and I reject all of it because I implicate myself in every bad decision you make. I'm the person who's responsible for it.
You're behind me going, do it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm the one telling you to do it, and then I'm the one also feeling guilty because I'm like, I'm the dad. So this week we're going to talk through a lot of Google's hardships right now. Epic just won almost everything it asked for in the Google Play Store trial that the company lost back in December. Holy cow. Like, I was like, wow, how long ago was that? It was in December. It was 10 months ago. But the restitution is coming, and the government is asking for some significant. Or sorry, I'm mixing these two.
I know it's so weird to get both of these in the same.
I just
week.
did this live on.
I was doing this in the show notes where I'm like, wait, which one is which? I have to keep track of who hates Google right now.
Right. No, Epic just won everything. So the restitution is set for the Epic trial, and we'll get
Yes.
into those decisions. And then the DOJ, the government, is asking for structural and behavioral repercussions for Google. So that could get really really messy. But to start with the Play Store trial, this one I think is obviously of a smaller scope, right? The Play Store is massive. It hosted a billion plus apps, but this is really just pertaining to the remedies that Epic was seeking around distribution of the apps inside the Play Store, but also how those apps are showcased to people and how easy it is for third parties to come in and host their own third party app stores, right? And I think what's interesting here is twofold. One is that most of these decisions only apply for 3 years. And that is important because by the end of 2027, we don't know what things are going to look like. And the idea here is that Google not only has the right to appeal and perhaps stay the ruling entirely, which could happen, but
They have appealed too. Like
they will.
believe
I mean, they have
filed.
appealed. Yes,
Yeah.
they filed an appeal, but we don't know if it'll get stayed or delayed even further. But the 3 year period of these remedies taking effect have been put in place specifically so that the competitors coming into this market should be able to effect some significant change within that time, right?
Yeah,
And
the quote from the judge is to level the playing field for the entry and growth of rivals without burdening Google excessively.
right, without burdening Google excessively, which is interesting because Google has a monopoly here. So
Right.
I'm surprised that the judge who ruled in Epic's favor is also like Google has a right to run its Play Store, run its ecosystem the way it wants, but also it's a monopoly and should be treated as such. And all these remedies are meant to undo a lot of the harm that the company has leveled against potential competitors in the last, however many years the Play Store has been around, 15, 20 years. So let's go through some of the remedies because I think these are really interesting. First, Google is basically going to be forced to open up the Play Store itself to other app stores, which is fascinating. You'll be able to download the Epic Game Store, or as we learned yesterday, the Xbox Game Store
Right.
through the Play Store. And then second, those alternative Play Stores are going to be able to, because Google is being required to give access to the full library of Play Store apps. So you have the situation essentially where Microsoft or Epic could just like relist all these applications without really doing much work.
Yeah.
And then adding their own exclusive apps on top of those, and then completely get rid of Google Play billing, which allows them to just like move Google's 30% or 15% or whatever aside and charge whatever they want with whomever they want. I don't know. I mean, this is fascinating to me because, as our coworker Matt Schultz has pointed out many times, including in an editorial that he wrote after this ruling came out, Google's discovery on the Play Store is freaking trash.
Oh my God,
it's so bad.
It's so bad, and the only thing that makes it worse is that they keep saying they're going to make it better, and every time they try to make it better, they make it worse. Putting aside the fact that you'll be able to download like the Epic Game Store through Google Play, this is very much turning Android into like the PC gaming market, except for both apps and games, not just games, right? But like,
although realistically, like games are the only category that make any money.
Yes, true. And like that will be the majority of like, we've heard Epic, we've heard Microsoft, like obviously those are plays at figuring out how to make money off games. Because it would be like downloading the Epic Game Store through Steam, which you can't do obviously. I think the other big difference, the more meaningful difference though, that would allow the Epic Game Store to succeed in this style, right? In the way that they're trying to do this, is that I don't know if people really like the Play Store. Like, I think they use it because it's the default, but like people like Steam, right? Like anytime a game launches on PC exclusive to the Epic Game Store, everyone is mad and essentially ignores it. And then when it finally comes to Steam, as they usually do, right, whether it takes 6 months or a year or like 3 years in the case of like Kingdom Hearts, like people treat that as the like true launch, like the true PC launch for a game. And I don't think that would be true in the case of the Epic Store versus the Play Store. I think most people would be like, if there's an exclusive game to Android in the Epic Game Store, that's fine. I will go download the Epic Game Store because it's just a different app. And like maybe I will even find games that I like more. Like you will get, Fall Guys and Fortnite and Rocket League and like all of these titles that are not available on Android in any way right now. Or I guess they kind of are if you sideload, but they will be much easier to find. I think there's like space for Epic to compete on Android in a way that like they have failed to do up to this point on PC.
There's also the argument that the mobile app ecosystem does not really lend itself to the sort of curation that,
Yeah.
like, I mean, let's be real, right? People are, they love Steam because there's a curatorial element to Steam that Valve perpetuates through its marketing, through its culture,
Yeah.
and there's a preciousness to Steam, both from its user base and its owners, that does not exist on the App Store or the Play Store, right? It is
No.
very much about volume in those areas. And this keeps coming through to me when I look at the catalog on Apple Arcade, for instance, or what's available in Play Pass. Like, when was the last time that you tried to figure out what was available to you if you had a Play Pass subscription,
I'm
right?
so happy you bring this up. I have a trial going. Like I got like a 3 month trial of Play Pass in my email, and I was like, yeah, okay. I haven't used Play Pass in like probably 18 months. I'll see what's on there. And it's so interesting because like first of all, it makes the Play Store even more annoying because anytime you open the Play Store, it defaults to the Play Pass tab that is like added to your like so instead of defaulting to like games, which is already like kind of annoying enough because I'm usually not opening the Play Store to download a game, and now defaults to like the same like 20 apps that are included in Play Pass. But there are like some interesting titles on there, like Stardew Valley is on Play Pass, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, cool. I could download that on the tab S10 Plus I'm reviewing. Neat. I wonder what else is here. And then like within 15 minutes, you'll be like, oh, there's like 10 games that I care about. Like it's like once you get past those, you're like, oh, like I don't really know anything else that's here. All of the like apps that are included are like, oh, there's like a notes app, I guess. I guess I could use that if I didn't want to use like Google Keep or something and like so on. And it's one of those things that like for 10 minutes, you're like, wait, is PlayPass good? And then like you're like, no, not really. It's not particularly good unless you get a free trial. And like I think Apple Arcade is more successful than that because it is focused fully on games instead of trying to be apps and games and will remove in-app purchases and stuff like that. But they also have like some exclusives and like they work a little bit more closely with like big name developers. And even then, I think Apple Arcade is a bit shallow for the amount of money that it wants from you, but like it is a better overall experience.
Yeah, it is. It's a better. But what I meant by my original comment is, regardless of whether you're on the App Store or Play Store, the sheer volume and the incentive system that really, like, now just explicitly exists. Like, it used to be a little bit more subtle, but now it's fully explicit. Is that Google and Apple make money through in-app purchases, and you are going to be guided to download as many applications as possible, particularly games that emphasize that business model. And while they can crow about Play Pass or Apple Arcade or whatever, those are always going to play second fiddle. And what I think people love about Steam is that quality tends to rise to the top. And I'm not saying every popular game on Steam is a good game, but what you have is a dedicated group of gamers that genuinely care about the experience of buying things on a marketplace
Yeah.
in a way that nobody really cares about on either the App Store or the Play Store. The experience, like I have sort of a side story, like a little anecdote that will help you kind of understand where I'm coming from. So I'm using an iPhone 16 Pro right now. I just came off using the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, which I still don't think I've talked about on the podcast. I think like I've said this like 8 times, and we've
Yeah.
never gotten around to it. Maybe today.
It's not gonna happen. Don't
It'll
get
be
your
our
hopes
white.
up,
It'll be our
listener.
white whale. We'll talk about it next year. It'll be like, oh, I've been using this for a year and a half.
The Pixel 10 Pro Fold will come out, and Daniel will be like, the thing about the Pixel 9 Pro. We got to go this week. Sorry, guys.
But what I've like, there's this whole discourse around Threads right now and how like it's being used for engagement bait, whatever. And that's true. Like Threads is not a great product. It's better than X, but not a great product. But what I like about it is that my algorithm, the feed that I see is very much a bunch of indie iOS developers discussing their apps and like promoting their friends' apps and going through this very vivacious, maybe it's a resurgence or maybe it's always been there and I just haven't been paying attention for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But there's this really great feeling where indie developers are getting their time to shine right now around the camera button and the new APIs in iOS 18 and all that. And there's a community of indie developers that really care about making great apps on iOS. And if you go to the App Store today and you open up the Apps tab, you are never in a million years going to find any of them.
No.
Right?
No.
And you need to be able to rely on the editorial decisions of Google and Apple to showcase good quality apps on their stores. And you cannot. You just frankly cannot. And the idea that maybe sure an Epic or an Xbox will come in and like maybe curate a better set of games for you, that's fine. What I really want is like an indie app store that you just see and like curates a bunch of great Android apps for me every day.
Yeah.
Maybe the market for that isn't huge, but the overhead of actually doing that now is low. This decision has lowered the barrier to entry for basically anybody who wants to create a thin client, because all you need to do is then tap into this API that Google will be forced to share, modify the database, and showcase a bunch of apps that you like, set up a separate biller or billing provider for your users, or you can use Play Billing if you want, right? Like you still have that option. But the option is now there for these third-party app stores that I don't think were ever going to be successful before, because as easy as it was, quote, to sideload an app or an app store even, it really wasn't. And Google didn't make it easy for people to know that. That's why I like this.
You know what's fascinating? So I've been browsing through the Play Store while I've been listening to you, and I should say I'm doing this on desktop so I don't hold my phone in front of me. But the top several rows are like, it's, the top charts are filled with all of the apps you've heard of before, with the exception of like some random VPN I've never heard of that I wouldn't recommend downloading. Play is recommending apps like Target for me, which is insane because I know the Target app is on my phone. And then you scroll like several categories down. I'm talking like 12 categories down, and you find something called Innovation Corner, which I've never seen. I guess maybe I've just never scrolled this far. And it says big ideas from up and coming companies, which is kind of what you're asking for, right? And to be fair, I have heard of one of these apps. Notion Calendar is on here for some reason from Notion, but otherwise, like, I don't know any of these. Why is this like? Should this not be? Now, granted, it's literally only 10 apps and you can't view anymore, but like this category should be at like the top of the page, because like I don't need to know that TikTok is like the top downloaded app on the Play Store. Like, what does that do for me? Like, I want to know about this bourbon and whiskey app for searching bottles of whiskey. Let me manage my whiskey collection. That might be cool. It's only got 5,000 downloads. Could be a good app. that doesn't exist. And like, I do think there's space, and especially if like these sorts of marketplaces now need to be hosted in the Play Store itself, that someone could essentially build an app marketplace that is the equivalent. And there are lots of problems with Steam curation, by which I mean Steam curators, like the people who do the curation programs on Steam. But you could effectively have an app store within the Play Store that is a curated list of like, hey, these apps have like 10,000 downloads, and we're working with developers directly, and we have handpicked them to be like, these are good services that you should try. I think that could go a lot of places, at least with enthusiasts. I think general users are probably going to stick to the couple dozen apps they rely on daily, but like for the people listening to this show, for you and I think that could be a really like interesting experience to have something like essentially a curated store within the store. And if Google's not going to step up to do it, I hope someone else does.
I mean, that's what I find so fascinating about this is that Google has rested on its laurels for so long. All
Not
it
even.
needed to
It's made it
do,
worse though. Like it's not even like they have done nothing. Like they have made changes, and I would say every change they've made has made it more difficult to find a new application that I might really like, or a new game that like would make me more of a mobile gamer. Like I was complaining earlier this week to Matt Schultz because like they moved the search, like they got rid of the search bar in the Play Store and made it a tab. And to search for any app, have to tap that and then tap the search bar, because the search page is just filled with like hashtags. It's
right?
like, for discovery, and it's like, and for the audio listeners, I put air quotes around discovery. I'm never going to tap any of those. It's just an extra step that pisses me off every time I go to download an app.
Yeah, yeah, and like in addition to all of these remedies, Google is also not allowed to share revenue with any app developer anymore. It
Right.
cannot get into exclusive distribution deals with companies. It cannot say, we will pay you to, or we'll give you a break on subscription fees if you exclusively distribute your app through the Play Store, which we've learned through this trial was a lever that Google loved to pull. Google can incentivize developers to not release an app on another platform. And there's also this big one, which Google's no longer allowed to incentivize device makers or carriers to pre-install the Play Store or not. And I mean, more importantly, because every OEM is going to install the Play Store, obviously, not install other competing app stores, right? Like when OnePlus decided to potentially start distributing the Epic Game Store on its phones, Google put a stop to that. We learned that through this trial, and that never happened. That never came to fruition. And Google claimed that, like, oh, you could download Fortnite through the Epic Store on a Samsung phone or through the Galaxy Store, but getting anything through the Galaxy Store is so freaking annoying
The
that I don't
Galaxy
think
Store makes the
anybody.
Play Store look good. Like
It
that's
does.
how
It really
bad
does.
it is.
I still don't know why that thing exists. Anyway, there's a 3-year period from November 1st where these remedies are going to go into effect. I think will be an interesting bellwether of how entrenched the mobile ecosystem is, right? Like, can developers get their stuff together quickly enough to actually affect significant change and user behavior in a significant enough way within 3 years, right? Because to be honest, this is all like every monopoly lawsuit against Google or Apple or Amazon, right under the surface, all about defaults, right? It's about user behavior relying on complacency and not changing defaults. And the fact that, if you buy a Samsung phone, you still get access to the Galaxy Store on your home screen. The Play Store is there too, but the Galaxy Store is there as well. You instinctively go to the Play Store, right? I don't know if anybody in the world would expect to go to the Galaxy Store first. And if I mean, they open it, they see how terrible it is, they close it and never open it again. But
If you're really a sicko, you open it, you download Good Lock, and then you never open
Good Lock's on the Play Store now.
it. Is it? Oh, I didn't
Yeah,
even know this. Okay, are all the modules on it, or do you still need?
I think you download the
You
modules
can
through the
download them
app.
through. Yeah, but don't they download through the? Whatever. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I know that I think Good Lock is either on the Play Store or it is coming to the Play Store.
It might be. It's not. I don't see it now, but it might be coming to the Play Store.
Okay. Yeah, I think Google. I mean, I think Samsung announced it maybe as part of the One UI 7 update,
Okay.
but I know it's coming.
Well, then there's really no reason for the Galaxy Store to exist.
Yeah. So, I mean that's it, right? Like we'll see what happens. I hope this is obviously a big deal for games, and Android is something of a sort of open market for games, some illicit, some not. I think what's interesting is what's happening on the emulation side with Android.
Agreed.
There's been sort of a resurgence of interest in emulation after Apple started allowing emulators in the App Store. But Android is really where emulators shine, right? Like unless it's Nintendo shutting down all the Switch emulators,
Yeah.
you can do more with Android on emulation. Will we get an emulator app store on Android, right? That just curates, will EmuDeck launch its own app store or something like that? Will Humble Bundle, for example, or some of these other PC based distribution platforms launch on Android, right? And back in the day, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but Humble Bundle would sell these pay what you can Android game bundles. You spend like $8 and you get 15 games, and some of them were actually exclusive to the Humble Bundle. You download an APK, and they were decent games. But the problem was that they would never get updated, right? There was no model, there was no distribution network, so that if you weren't on the Play Store, they would just never get updated. And that's as important as the first download, right? The fact that like you can take for granted that if a app developer updates their app, it will come through the App Store or the Play Store. So yeah, that's very interesting. Obviously, Google says our competitor is Apple, right? Like our main competitor here, this is their appeal. Our main competitor is Apple. Why are you forcing us to open up distribution of Android apps to other Android app developers and distributors when we are primarily competing for eyeballs with Apple and the App Store, which I don't think that argument holds water.
Yeah,
at all.
I'm not a lawyer, but like that's your competitor, but we're not talking about you competing, the Pixel competing with the iPhone for sales. We're talking about competition on your platform, right?
Within Android.
Right. And they can talk about Apple as much as they want. Those trials were very different. I believe Google's trial was a jury trial and Apple's was not. Even just how the trial was run was completely different. And in some ways, the openness of Google's platform got them in more trouble than the fact that Apple runs a closed platform. And
No,
like
the shenanigans
well,
that Google pulled
okay, I mean that too, but like
got them in trouble.
Right, because they were promoting it as an open platform and then doing lots of behind the scenes deals.
The shadiest possible stuff.
Absolutely. And so I don't, frankly, as you said, I don't think the argument holds a lot of water because I don't care what Apple is doing as an Android user, right? Like the competition they have with Apple does not affect me when I open the Play Store. What affects me when I open the Play Store is Epic Games hosting their apps in there, and the answer is no, because they don't see Google's terms as fair, and you can agree or disagree with that, but like that is as an end user what you're experiencing, and that was the case that was brought. Oh, and we should also quickly say, as we're talking, right, the court has not yet like said if they're going to stay Epic's or the changes that will be made on November 1st. So that is happening right now, but they have appealed. It will probably not go into effect on November 1st if you ask me to bet on it, but we don't know as of this recording.
Right, that's fair. And November 1st is 2 weeks away, so it's not a long time. Okay, and then there's this other trial where Google was deemed to be a search monopoly, and now the government, the DOJ, has come out and asked for four different types of remedies, both structural and behavioral. Structural being potentially the breakup of Google into multiple companies to separate the components that go into what the government deemed a monopoly and won against Google. So, primarily, what they're trying to do is separate search from Chrome, like this idea that Chrome, as the browser, is directly tied to Google search business. Means that anybody who downloads Chrome defaults to a Google search page every time they open up a tab. And there are a lot of ways that this could happen. Now, the DOJ doesn't go into specifics on how the structural breakup could happen, but basically they want Chrome, search, Android, and like other core businesses to be less codependent, right? That might come with Chrome not necessarily being pre-installed on an Android phone, or Google being forced to allow like a change in default search if you download Chrome on the desktop. It might be as simple as just more education, right? Most people who use their phone or go on Google don't know that there are competitors out there. And then I think what's really interesting is the government's really honing in on this idea that Google's default dominance in search allows them to accrue an order of magnitude more data than a Bing or another smaller, like a DuckDuckGo rival. And as a result, their models are just more accurate, right? Like they can improve your search experience by just having access to a huge amount of data that is not available to the competitors. So the government wants to, quote, offset the advantage of that by essentially preventing Google from using some of that data to improve its products, or by sharing that data with some of its rivals, right? Anonymized data, obviously, which could be really interesting, right? If
Right.
Bing or DuckDuckGo or one of the many up and coming AI competitors gets a little bit of access to that Google search metadata, it could do a lot with that. Then there's this idea that Google forces publishers and other website owners to opt in to allowing its AI crawler essentially to use the data on the website to train its models.
Yeah.
And there's this risk that if you opt out of that training data, you're essentially risking your own ability to rank on Google search, which is so interesting. I think that of all of this stuff shows just how dominant Google is, because you could tank your own business just by opting out of this one burgeoning part of Google's AI business, right? Yeah, I mean, like when I think about the scope of this, it's fascinating.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
I find it difficult to wrap my head around like how these changes would even affect me, right? And I think Google is relying on that to, I don't want to say scaremonger, that sounds a little negative and maybe a little overreaching, but like certainly the blog post that Google's vice president of regulatory affairs published 2 days ago as we record this is certainly designed to scare you, right? Like it's designed to say that like if the DOJ gets their way, your privacy will be broken, American innovation in AI will die, Android will no longer be free for OEMs to work off of, right? And to me, it's like, okay, like I hear their perspective, which is obviously biased, but at the same time, it is difficult for me to take seriously the notion that like my search data will suddenly become compromised from the company that was keeping track of what I was doing in incognito browsing, right? Like, for example, it is difficult for me to take serious the threat of like we will no longer offer Android as a free open source platform when one, I don't know how much that certainly doesn't impact consumers in the US. It does to a broader extent globally, but like even so, it sounds more like a threat to stop the DOJ from doing it than it does like a promise of like this would have to happen if Android was split off on its own. And the same goes for the idea of American innovation in AI. I'm AI skeptical, and I'm not sure that I think that they're not rallying my patriotism, I suppose, by being like, don't you want America to win the AI race? The DOJ doesn't. I find Google's argument against breaking up the company weak in a way that I didn't expect. I'm not sure how you felt about this blog post, Daniel.
Look, I think a lot of this comes down to Google is paying Apple a lot of money to distribute Safari or Google search as the default search engine on iPhone, right? Like they're what was like $20 billion a year or something like that. Google also pays Firefox to be the default search engine on Firefox browsers, right? Mozilla is a foundation. It's a charity. They make a lot of money from Google. They would, I think, be in a much more precarious financial position if they were forced to stop accepting this money. Apple wouldn't, right? But the way that Apple positioned it at the trial was that Google makes the best search product. Why wouldn't we? This is a win-win for them. They're getting $20 billion a year, and they get to say their customers have access to the best search engine on the internet, and which is true. I mean, this is the whole counterpoint to the argument that Google has a search monopoly. It's that Google search is the best search product. But is Google search the best product because they have continued to innovate, or because they've been choking out any potential competitor for the last decade through Android and through the distribution of Google search as the default search engine on iOS? It's really hard to say because we don't know any better. We don't know what it would be like if Bing had the time to grow as the default search engine on Google on the iPhone, right? Like it was for a while. Wolfram Alpha was also sort of in there as a primary. I think it's still there, right? You can change your default search engine on iOS. You can change it to Bing if you want, I believe. You can change your default search engine in Europe on any you launch your new Android phone in any country in the EU, you get that pop-up asking whether you want Google as your default search.
You can choose, at least on American iPhones, you can choose Google, Yahoo, Bing, DuckDuckGo, and Ecosia.
Because
I'm not familiar with, to be honest with you. And I believe Yahoo is just Bing, right? So it's just two different ways to access Bing.
Yeah, I think that's true. So anyway, I just think like both of these can be true, but also the fact that Google forces Android makers to preload not just Chrome, but Google search and the Play Store and Maps, which is basically another version of Google search, and all these other services, if they want access to Android, to unspoiled Android, I guess, is a big deal and probably not sustainable long term. But at the same time, the idea that Google might be forced to split up into two separate companies, or like divest Chrome or run Chrome as a separate entity, doesn't really, I mean, I don't know what that would look like. But for example, I've been using Arc browser for the last couple of weeks as my default on all platforms: iOS, Android, Mac OS, not WebOS, because I don't think you can run Arc on WebOS. And it's great. It's a great platform. It works for me. I enjoy it. But it's based on Chromium, right? Chromium is an open source Google-owned project. And Google will just point back to the fact that like Chrome is just a client built on this open source project that so many different companies contribute to.
Right.
And if you really wanted to, you could go to bing.com on your Chrome browser. And it's true. It's true. But defaults are really hard to shake. It also coincides with Google's ad tech dominance, right? Which is yet another monopoly trial that is ongoing right now. The last part of this remedy is that Google curates all these sponsored text ads at the top of your search results. And more recently, ads got added to AI overviews. So you're getting Google search text ads everywhere. And that really impacts people's ability to organically gain visibility into their work.
Yeah, couldn't couldn't say it. But it's, I don't know. All of this is so complicated, and like especially the DOJ stuff. Like we are half a decade from this being resolved, or maybe like none of this is going to happen anytime soon. So it's so tricky to even comment on because it's like this is gonna this is just gonna drag on for so long, you know?
And just like what happened with the Java lawsuit, like it's going to get watered down and
Yeah,
watered down and watered down,
absolutely.
and the eventual remedy is going to look nothing like this.
Almost certainly not. Yeah, it will probably be it will probably be something. I don't think Google gets out of this unscathed, but I think they will get out of it very, very mildly hurt. It will not be. I just can't see, and maybe that's a problem on my part, but I just can't. I don't even see the world where it's like suddenly Android is its own company, like spun off from Google and from Alphabet. Like it's just so hard to believe that that would happen, and you know, I don't know if it would be. It might be good for you and I. It might, but it's or even just the mobile ecosystem in general. But it's yeah, I don't know. It's so tricky to
Well,
like
if
even
I
imagine.
guess if the remedy is meant to allow competitors to encroach on Google search's dominance, which is ultimately what this comes down to,
Right,
then that's happening anyway,
right.
right? AI search will disrupt Google search. It has already started. And I don't know if it'll take 5 years or 10 years or a year, but this will happen. It's not like I'm saying don't do anything with Google search. Like, yes, it's a monopoly. It is using its dominance to gain significant advantage in the market. But ChatGPT and all of these other companies are coming in and building competitors to Google search that have necessarily changed Google's core product in a very short amount of time. And this lawsuit is probably not really, even though it does deal with training AI models, it's not really getting to the core of the issue, which is that the relationship that we have to content on the internet has been shaped by the existence of search engines over the last 2 decades. And that we have come to rely on this, on the 10 blue links, this curated version of what we think of as the internet. And we can't undo that idea. We just can't undo that behavior. And whether it's opening Instagram and Instagram's algorithm curating a bunch of videos and other content for us, or same with TikTok or Reddit or Google Search or Google Discover or Flipboard or any other number of aggregators, we have removed our own responsibility to curate our experience on the internet. We have given up. And I agree that Google's too dominant, right? I agree. But like, let's play it out. Let's say Chrome gets spun out or Android gets spun out. And the company is forced to sort of water down those products. I don't know. Maybe it's the cynical part of me, but who benefits? Apple. Apple. Sure, you're not getting $20 billion a year from Google anymore, but you've just put ChatGPT into your phones. And maybe in 5 years, you don't need Google search anymore because ChatGPT has its own search engine baked into Apple Intelligence.
Yeah, I mean
Feels bad,
it's
man. And
it's one of those things where it's yeah, the DOJ's lawsuit is designed, I suppose, to help promote the start of something, of a new upstart, right? Of like the next Google or something. But like I don't know if we live in that era. Actually, I feel like I do know. We don't live in that era anymore, right? Like I don't think without the backing of one of the already established major players, I don't know if we, you know, like you can make the argument of like, well, OpenAI was where were they 10 years ago? And it's like, sure, but like look at all of the investment they have, right? Like is OpenAI even where they are right now without Microsoft essentially bankrolling them for several years now, right? Like that company exists essentially because of Microsoft. They continue to try to raise funding, right? Like we just saw that Apple had just backed out of their latest round of funding. I don't know if the next Google can arrive, and we've seen some startups try to make that happen, right? Like what's the paid what's the paid search engine?
Oh, I
It's
don't
not
know.
Kagi. We've talked about it a couple times.
Oh yeah, okay.
Right? Like maybe Kagi is the future. I still haven't tried it. I should really try Kagi. Maybe that's what I'll do this week. But for the most part, like I just don't know if we live in a world where uh the world that allowed Google and Amazon and Facebook to become the companies they are today. I don't know if that world exists.
I think you're right. Okay, let's move on. We got a few more minutes, and I want to discuss smartphone bezels with you, which is a thing that you wrote about this week, which is less lower stakes than all the other
Yeah,
stuff we've talked
yeah.
about.
This has
But
been such a serious conversation that it made me want to go. I'm gonna start looking up law school applications. I feel like I need a better grounding in this. Yeah, I wrote about how I think I've used a couple phones this year that have made me realize that I think like I am happy with where smartphone bezels are. I don't think smartphone manufacturers are. And this is a conversation that has been had around tablets to a certain extent, but like my general point is that I understand why the last decade, really, right? Of I start my little history section with a conversation about the LG G2. The last decade of trying to minimize bezels and bring displays edge to edge. I know how we got there. I think we are going too far, right? Like I think the iPhone 16 Pro Max, we've seen complaints about poor palm rejection, both too aggressive and too what's the opposite of aggression? Right? Like some people have issues where it will detect their palms and have random key presses when they're typing without like them trying to. Other people have been like, my display is not responsive enough. Like the palm rejection is like detecting that like actual touches should not be there, which is a problem. At the same time, we have rumors that the S25 Ultra, on the Android side of things, is trying to best Apple's 91.4% screen to bezel ratio. So it's only going to get, which Samsung's current phones are already so slim around the display that like the last like year or so, I've really come to be like, and I want to write more about this. I have a follow up piece planned, but like phones are utilities, they're appliances at the end of the day, modern phones. And I think we may have gone too far in thinking about smartphones as jewelry, as like designer pieces of technology where it's often form over function. And I think the minimization of bezels is like, in some ways, like another example of that. I have found devices like the Pixel 8a and the regular iPhone 16 extremely comfortable to use, in part because they have like a few millimeters of bezel around the display that gives my palm space to hold on to the device, right? Like those are two phones that I do not feel like I need to use a case with, which is not true with a lot of these other phones where I often feel like I need to add an additional protective accessory, not because I'm worried I'm going to drop it, but because it's uncomfortable to use without some kind of separation between the display and the rest of the phone. So that's kind of my argument. As we record, the piece only went up like an hour and a half ago. I'm fully ready for people to disagree with me on bezels, but I'm curious if you are one of them, Daniel.
no, I don't. I don't really have any real skin in the game. Like
Sure.
I think I don't really care if a phone has large bezels as long as it fits with the aesthetic. And I think what's more important is accurate palm rejection. Frankly, I think
Sure.
what's more important than large or small bezels is whether or not the phone is too heavy or too slippery or
Well, and
just
that's what I want to write about in my follow up piece. Is that I again like transitioning to more premium materials has made these devices heavier and harder to manage. And one of my favorite things about using the iPhone 16 as a secondary phone over the last couple of weeks has been like I routinely forget that thing's in my pocket because it is fairly light. I don't have a case on it because the aluminum frame is light. The matte glass on the back is like doesn't even particularly feel like glass, and I mean that in a positive light. Like it's very similar to the plastic build of the Pixel 8a, where I never felt like that phone needed a case because it was not slippery, it was light, it was friendly in my pocket, and that's not where most smartphones are right now, and I think that's a problem.
How are you adjusting to the 60 hertz display after 2 weeks with it?
You stop noticing it, like
Yeah.
genuinely. Like I'm not making excuses for Apple. This $800 device should have a 90 hertz or a 120 hertz display on it. If I was reviewing the phone, which I'm not, I would rate that. It would be in the cons, but as just a regular user, it's very noticeable out of the box. And by the end of like the first week, even switching back and forth between like I carry my Pixel 9 Pro on me, and like even switching back and forth, you stop noticing it. It really becomes a non-issue for the most part.
Hmm. Okay. Okay, last couple things. Nintendo created an alarm clock for
Yeah, I just
some
love this
reason.
thing. Yeah.
This is so weird and not the Switch 2 that people were hoping. It's also
I hope they
$100.
don't launch the Switch 2. I hope that Alarmo is the future of the company, personally. I don't think we've earned the Switch 2 as a population. I think we've been too greedy. We've been too mean to the Switch and its decade old Nvidia processor. I think we need to be nice to the Switch, and sure,
You're
the
the
Legend of
second
Zelda.
person that said that the Switch is a decade old, and I'm like, it came out in
No, no,
March
no. The chipset in it. The chipset is the
Oh, the
same.
chipset.
The
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's the same chipset that was in like the Shield tablet, which is
yeah.
a decade old.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, no, but the thing came out in early 2017, didn't
Yes,
it?
100%. But I'm also being very tongue in cheek. I find it frustrating that the performance on that new Zelda game is not very good. When it has no reason to be bad. Yes, this thing is overpriced. For people who don't know, Alarmo is like it's a little alarm clock you put next to your bed that has like motion tracking, and it does a bunch of stuff to wake you up and snooze, and it's got a bunch of like little effects in it. It's very cute. You should watch the video. $100 is already a pretty steep price. I was so close to buying it though, just because I think it's neat, and because I need to put my money where my mouth is when it comes to wanting single use gadgets back, which I do, and this is very much one of those. I had it in my cart, like truly, and then I saw at the very bottom of Nintendo's page is a little frequently asked questions section. And one of them is, can Alarmo be used if you have multiple sleepers and or pets in your bed? The answer is that if there's more than one sleeper in the bed, we recommend using button mode for the best experience, which turns off all of the hands-free motion stuff that is supposed to be the reason that you would spend $100 on this thing. So I did not end up.
Well, I don't know I mean, I know a lot of people are going to buy this thing because it's very
For
cute,
sure. It's
but
adorable. It's and it's fun, and it's a thing that like it's such a Nintendo thing of like Sony's out here being like, come buy our $700 PS5 Pro, and Nintendo's like, we have a $100 alarm clock that plays the Super Mario Odyssey theme song to wake you up, and you're gonna buy it. But yeah, unfortunately, if they made a $50 version that didn't have the motion stuff in it, that was the button mode thing, I would probably buy it. But
the way that I think
like,
about it is like everybody's mad that the PS5 Pro is $700
mhm,
and that most people upgrading to it are people that already have a PS5
right.
and that they're going to do it begrudgingly or whatever, and like they're going to resent the fact that they bought this thing the whole time they're playing. And then Nintendo comes out and charges a seventh of that for a freaking non-touchscreen alarm clock, and people are going to find so much joy out of using this thing every morning that they're going to tell all of
Yeah.
their friends to do the same. And
Well,
it's just
that's the
like this.
problem. Like
Exactly. I mean, it
that's
speaks to Nintendo. Like they
yeah.
figure out a way to justify people spending $80 on the same game that they've bought 20 times.
We talked about this with the PS5 Pro, but like part of in fact, I would say the biggest issue with the PS5 Pro is that they didn't have a marquee title attached to that thing to be like, you will not believe how good our new game blank looks on the PS5 Pro.
Right.
Like they came out and they did a 7-minute thing that was like, look at the leaves in the background, they're slightly better than they were on the regular PS5, and that was it. And then they're like, by the way, like, I know we promised 60 fps like solid 4K gaming on the PS5, and we didn't deliver it, but now we're really going to deliver it. You got to trust us this time, guys. Third time's the charm, because they also kind of talked about the PS4 Pro in that way. And then a week later they did like a state of play or whatever branding they gave that presentation, and their like marquee title at the end of that was like, a remaster of Horizon Zero Dawn where it's like, guys, like I don't like it. Here's what I'll say. No one, not no one. Lots of people would not be complaining about the $700 PS5 Pro price if the end of that video had been like, we're bringing Bloodborne to it. It's 60 FPS, like at 4K. Like I'm just saying, like the issue is that like when Nintendo announces the Switch 2, if they do it how they announced the Switch 1 with just like a teaser video with a later presentation rather than like a full direct, do you know what will be like in the video of that Switch 2 video is going to be whatever the new Super Mario game is, because that's what they did with the original Switch. Like Odyssey was in that teaser video. We didn't know it yet, but it was. And that will make like obviously people are already going to be excited about it, but like they will be like, hey, like we are making like the game you've been asking for the Switch 2. You know, it's a problem where it's Sony just doesn't have the library in place right now or the drive to make titles, and also the race towards ultra realistic fidelity is making games like more expensive. It takes longer to make and they need to sell tens of millions of copies to make that budget back, and they're not going to do that. That's the problem with the PS5
Before we end, I want to ask you,
Pro. Yeah.
what was something that made you happy this week?
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna write about this like hopefully next week. I would like to find time to do it before the end of the month. I think I've talked previously about watching Gossip Girl on this show. I know I have, so I'm going to go off of that. We were watching an episode of Gossip Girl, and one of my favorite things to do with the show has become pausing it and looking at the smartphones or not even smartphones, just the phones they're using.
The phones,
Right,
yeah.
because that show had a sponsorship or a partnership with Verizon. They're all Verizon branded phones. The episode that we were watching aired in May of 2011. Daniel, can you guess what Verizon exclusive kind of smartphone showed up in May of 2011? I'll give you a hint.
Verizon.
It was announced in April of 2011 and it was discontinued in June.
Oh no. Oh, it was the HTC Rhyme.
No, it was the Microsoft Kin.
Oh, you said so, not a smartphone. Oh, that's
Kind
right.
of
It
a
was the
smartphone.
Kin.
Kind of a smartphone. So I went on Truly when it showed up because it was a close up on the Kin in someone's hands, and like I paused it and I told Maddie the entire history of the Kin. It's one of my favorite failed products of all time. I find it hysterical. I think it's it was such a weird response to the iPhone several years later. Like it's so funny to think about the fact that like April of, or no, sorry, not 2011, 2010. I screwed up the dates. The Kin is 2010. But like at the same time, like I believe the iPhone 4 leak, the Gizmodo leak, is also April of 2010. So while everyone is reporting on Apple's new iPhone that looks like radically different from what came before, Microsoft is like, we made a phone for teens. Look, you can like, there's no app store, but you can pin your conversations to the front of it. And truly, there was like a demo like hidden within this episode of Gossip Girl where like you watch someone like move their contacts around like the home screen, and I like couldn't get enough of like they were a month into this product's 2-month lifespan, and I just loved that like it's such a perfect time capsule of like that era of phones. It
Yeah.
made me really happy. I don't know, that's my thing. Not to half repeat myself, but it's more about the memory of the Kin than the show itself.
No, that's beautiful. I love that. I'm gonna stay. I mean, I don't know. There's it's not necessarily a nostalgia. It's a new product, but I got my pair of Pixel Buds Pro
Oh
2 last
yeah,
week, and I love them not
yeah,
because they sound the best or they have the best noise cancellation or anything, but I just love using them.
yeah.
Like there's just something about the Pixel Buds design and satisfying. Like they fit perfectly. The gestures are great. I just love these things. I got the mint color and they look great. And everything about them is just exactly what I want from a pair of earbuds, even though they are objectively too expensive and they do not sound as good as they should for the price. And the ANC and the mics are not as good as what they should be for the price. And like arguably they're not that competitive in today's market, but yet I love them and I really like using them and wearing them.
I gotta call you out though. because I can see you. This is the problem with doing a video podcast, Daniel, is I can see you. What are you wearing right now?
I'm wearing AirPods because the
Yeah.
microphone is way better on a pair of AirPods,
They
and I'm
are.
recording
They
a
are.
podcast.
I just thought it was so funny that you're like, I love the color, and meanwhile I'm like looking at your ear, and I'm like, those are white. Those are white AirPods right there.
They could be Galaxy Buds Pro 3. You never know.
That's true. I would not know. They don't have the light, the very cool differentiating light on the buds. So
You're right. They don't. I put tape over them so that nobody see them.
exactly.
All right. We're going to end things there. That's our show. Thank you so much for listening. If you have feedback, send us email at podcast@newyorkpolice.com, or you can go to the article that Jules puts on the website every week and comment down there if you want. You can leave us a review on Spotify or
On
Apple
Pocket Casts.
Podcasts or Podcast Now, although you can't write
You can't leave a review. You can leave a star rating.
But if
Go
you
leave a
if you can leave us a 5-star rating on Pocket Cast, that would actually mean a lot to me. I'd appreciate
it. Would mean a lot to me too.
That doesn't matter. Just joking.
Hey, are you on vacation next week?
I'm on vacation. I will come back for the podcast though.
Are you coming back for the podcast? Okay, because I was gonna have James on. We were gonna talk about
bring
Boss.
James. I mean, he's lovely and he's got a better accent than I do. So bring him on. You can wave to me as I maybe drive to Niagara Falls with my family.
Are you going to wait? You're gonna be here?
Well, I won't be in. I'll be on the Canadian side probably.
Oh yeah, okay. That
I'm
makes
not going to cross the
sense.
border to the inferior side of the falls.
It is inferior. I will never defend the United States side of it. I mean, I guess Maid of the Mist is good, I guess, or whatever.
You can do Maid on the Mist on the Canadian side.
I know you can. But there's a nice hiking trail on the American side.
I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. There's no hiking in this situation. Anyway, you enjoy the show next week. I will be back the following week, and we will go from there.
Cool.
All right. Well, have a good week, and we'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.